Now, as to the facts. We know that Edward had a secret stairway which led directly to his suite. Actually, the secret was poorly kept. There were many women, common and noble, who knew of the existence of that stairway and knew how to enter it. If Edward left the lower door unlocked, anyone could come up that stairway. He has another lock in the door of his bedroom, so only someone who was invited could come in. Even if she, or he, could get into the stairway, he was protected. Now here is what actually happened that night. I have evidence, by the way, and I have the confessions of both Laird and Lady Duncan. I will explain how I got those confessions in a moment. Primus, Lady Duncan had an assignation with Count Devereux last night. She went up the stairway to his room. She was carrying with her a small pistol. She had had an affair with Edward, and she had been rebuffed. She was furious, but she went to his room. He was drunk when she arrived, in one of the nasty moods with which both of you are familiar. She pleaded with him to accept her again as his mistress. He refused. According to Lady Duncan, he said, "I don't want you. You're not fit to be in the same room with her." The emphasis is Lady Duncan's, not my own. Furious, she drew a gun, the little pistol which killed him. The Countess gasped. "But Mary couldn't have—" "Please." Lord Darcy slammed the palm of his hand on the arm of his chair with an explosive sound. "My lady, you will listen to what I have to say." He was taking a devil of a chance, he knew. The Countess was his hostess and had every right to exercise her prerogatives. But Lord Darcy was counting on the fact that she had been under Count Devereux's influence so long that it would take her a little time to realize that she no longer had to knuckle under to the will of a man who shouted at her. He was right. She became silent. Father Bright turned to her quickly and said, "Please, my daughter, wait." "Your pardon, my lady," Lord Darcy continued smoothly. "I was about to explain to you why I know Lady Duncan could not have killed your brother. There is the matter of the dress. We are certain that the gown that was found in Edward's closet was worn by the killer. And that gown could not possibly have fit Lady Duncan. She's much too, hefty. She has told me her story, and for reasons I will give you later, I believe it. When she pointed the gun at your brother, she really had no intention of killing him. She had no intention of pulling the trigger. Your brother knew this. He lashed out and slapped the side of her head. She dropped the pistol and fell sobbing to the floor. He took her roughly by the arm and escorted her down the stairway. He threw her out. Lady Duncan, hysterical, ran to her husband. And then, when he had succeeded in calming her down a bit, she realized the position she was in. She knew that Laird Duncan was a violent, a warped man, very similar to Edward Count Devereux. She dared not tell him the truth, but she had to tell him something. So she lied. She told him that Edward had asked her up in order to tell her something of importance, that the something of importance concerned Laird Duncan's safety, that the Count told her that he knew of Laird Duncan's dabbling in black magic, that he threatened to inform church authorities on Laird Duncan unless she submitted to his desires, that she had struggled with him and ran away. Lord Darcy spread his hands. This was, of course, a tissue of lies, but Laird Duncan believed everything. So great was his ego that he could not believe in her infidelity, although he has been paralyzed for 5 years. "How can you be certain that Lady Duncan told the truth?" Father Bright asked warily. "Aside from the matter of the gown, which Count Devereux kept only for women of the common class, not the aristocracy, we have the testimony of the actions of Laird Duncan himself. We come then to Secundus. Laird Duncan could not have committed the murder physically. How could a man who was confined to a wheelchair go up that flight of stairs? I submit to you that it would have been physically impossible. The possibility that he has been pretending all these years, and that he is actually capable of walking, was disproved 3 hours ago, when he actually injured himself by trying to throttle me. His legs are incapable of carrying him even 1 step, much less carrying him to the top of that stairway. Lord Darcy folded his hands complacently. There remains, said Father Bright, the possibility that Laird Duncan killed Count Devereux by magical means. Lord Darcy nodded. That is indeed possible, Reverend Sir, as we both know, but not in this instance. Master Sean assures me, and I am certain that you will concur, that a man killed by sorcery, by black magic, dies of internal malfunction, not of a bullet through the heart. In effect, the black sorcerer induces his enemy to kill himself by psychosomatic means. He dies by what is technically known as psychic induction. Master Sean informs me that the commonest and crudest method of doing this is by the so-called simulacrum induction method, that is, by the making of an image, usually but not necessarily of wax, and using the law of similarity inducing death. The law of contagion is also used, since the fingernails, hair, spittle, and so on of the victim are usually incorporated into the image. Am I correct, Father? The priest nodded. Yes, and contrary to the heresies of certain materialists, it is not at all necessary that the victim be informed of the operation, although, admittedly, it can, in certain circumstances, aid the process. Exactly, said Lord Darcy. But it is well known that material objects can be moved by a competent sorcerer, black or white. Would you explain to my lady the Countess why her brother could not have been killed in that manner? Father Bright touched his lips with the tip of his tongue and then turned to the girl sitting next to him. There is a lack of relevancy. In this case, the bullet must have been relevant either to the heart or to the gun. To have travelled with a velocity great enough to penetrate, the relevancy to the heart must have been much greater than the relevancy to the gun. Yet the test, witnessed by myself, that was performed by Master Sean, indicates that this was not so. The bullet returned to the gun, not to your brother's heart. The evidence, my dear, is conclusive that the bullet was propelled by purely physical means, and was propelled from the gun. Then what was it Laird Duncan did? The Countess asked. Tertius, said Lord Darcy. Believing what his wife had told him, Laird Duncan flew into a rage. He determined to kill your brother. He used an induction spell, but the spell backfired and almost killed him. There are analogies on a material plane. If one adds mineral spirits and air to a fire, the fire will be increased. But if one adds ash, the fire will be put out. In a similar matter, if one attacks a living being psychically, it will die. But if one attacks a dead thing in such a manner, the psychic energy will be absorbed, to the detriment of the person who has used it. In theory, we could charge Laird Duncan with attempted murder, for there is no doubt that he did attempt to kill your brother, my lady. But your brother was already dead at the time. The resultant dissipation of psychic energy rendered Laird Duncan unconscious for several hours, during which Lady Duncan waited in suspenseful fear. Finally, when Laird Duncan regained consciousness, he realized what had happened. He knew that your brother was already dead when he attempted the spell. He thought, therefore, that Lady Duncan had killed the Count. On the other hand, Lady Duncan was perfectly well aware that she had left Edward alive and well, so she thought the black magic of her husband had killed her erstwhile lover. It was trying to protect the other, Father Bright said. Neither is completely evil, then. There may be something we can do for Laird Duncan." "I wouldn't know about that, Father," Lord Darcy said. "The healing art is the Church's business, not mine." He realized with some amusement that he was paraphrasing Dr. Pateley. "What Laird Duncan had not known," he went on quickly, "was that his wife had taken a gun up to the Count's bedroom. That put a rather different light on her visit, you see. That's why he flew into such towering rage at me, not because I was accusing him or his wife of murder, but because I had cast doubt on his wife's behaviour." He turned his head to look at the table where the Irish sorcerer was working. "Ready, Master Sean?" "Aye, my lord. All I have to do is set up the screen and light the lantern and the projector." "Go ahead, then." He looked back at Father Bright and the Countess. "Master Sean has a rather interesting lantern slide I want you to look at." "The most successful development I've ever made, if I may say so, my lord," the sorcerer said. "Proceed." Master Sean opened the shutter on the projector, and a picture sprang into being on the screen. There were gasps from Father Bright and the Countess. It was a woman. She was wearing the gown that had hung in the Count's closet. A button had been torn off, and the gown gaped open. Her right hand was almost completely obscured by a dense cloud of smoke. Obviously, she had just fired a pistol directly at the onlooker. But that was not what had caused the gasps. The girl was beautiful. Gloriously, ravishingly beautiful. It was not a delicate beauty. There was nothing flower-like or peaceful in it. It was a beauty that could have but one effect on a normal human male. She was the most physically desirable woman one could imagine. "Retro me Satanas," Father Bright thought wryly. "She's almost obscenely beautiful." Only the Countess was unaffected by the desirability of the image. She saw only the startling beauty. "Has neither of you seen that woman before?" "I thought not," said Lord Darcy. "Nor had Laird or Lady Duncan, nor Sir Pierre." "Who is she?" "We don't know. But we can make a few deductions. She must have come to the Count's room by appointment. This is quite obviously the woman Edward mentioned to Lady Duncan, the woman, the she, that the Scots noblewoman could not compare with. It is almost certain she is a commoner, otherwise she would not be wearing a robe from the Count's collection. She must have changed right there in the bedroom. Then she and the Count quarrelled, about what we do not know. The Count had previously taken Lady Duncan's pistol away from her, and had evidently carelessly let it lay on that table you see behind the girl. She grabbed it and shot him. Then she changed clothes again, hung up the robe, and ran away. No one saw her come or go. The Count had designed the stairway for just that purpose. Oh, we'll find her, never fear, now that we know what she looks like. At any rate, Lord Darcy concluded, the mystery is now solved to my complete satisfaction, and I shall so report to His Highness. Richard, Duke of Normandy, poured 2 liberal portions of excellent brandy into a pair of crystal goblets. There was a smile of satisfaction on his youthful face as he handed one of the goblets to Lord Darcy. "Very well done, my lord," he said. "Very well done." "I am gratified to hear your Highness say so," said Lord Darcy, accepting the brandy. "But how were you so certain that it was not someone from outside the castle? Anyone could have come in through the main gate. That's always open." "True, your Highness, but the door at the foot of the stairway was locked. Count Devereux locked it after he threw Lady Duncan out. There is no way of locking or unlocking it from the outside. The door had not been forced. No one could have come in that way, nor left that way, after Lady Duncan was so forcibly ejected. The only other way into the Count's suite was by the other door, and that door was unlocked." "I see," said Duke Richard. "I wonder why she went up there in the first place." "Probably because he asked her to. Any other woman would have known what she was getting into if she accepted an invitation to Count Devereux's suite." The Duke's handsome face darkened. "No, one would hardly expect that sort of thing from one's own brother. She was perfectly justified in shooting him." "Perfectly, Your Highness. And had she been anyone but the heiress, she would undoubtedly have confessed immediately. Indeed, it was all I could do to keep her from confessing to me, when she thought I was going to charge the Duncans with the killing. But she knew that it was necessary to preserve the reputation of her brother and herself, not as private persons, but as Count and Countess, as officers of the government of His Imperial Majesty the King. For a man to be known as a rake is one thing. Most people don't care about that sort of thing in a public official, so long as he does his duty and does it well. Which, as Your Highness knows, the Count did. But to be shot to death while attempting to assault his own sister, that is quite another thing. She was perfectly justified in attempting to cover it up, and she will remain silent, unless someone else is accused of the crime." "Which of course will not happen," said Duke Richard. He sipped at the brandy, then said, "She will make a good countess. She has judgment, and she can keep cool under duress. After she had shot her own brother, she might have panicked, but she didn't. How many women would have thought of simply taking off the damaged gown and putting on its duplicate from the closet?" "Very few," Lord Darcy agreed. "That's why I never mentioned that I knew the Count's wardrobe contained dresses identical to her own. By the way, Your Highness, if any good healer like Father Bright had known of those duplicate dresses, he would have realized that the Count had a sexual obsession about his sister. He would have known that all the other women the Count went after were sister substitutes." "Yes, of course, and none of them measure up." He put his goblet on the table. "I shall inform the king, my brother, that I recommended the new countess wholeheartedly. No word of this must be put down in writing, of course. You know, and I know, and the king must know. No one else must know." "One other knows," said Lord Darcy. "Who?" The Duke looked startled. "Father Bright." Duke Richard looked relieved. "Naturally. He won't tell her that we know, will he? I think Father Bright's discretion can be relied upon." In the dimness of the confessional, Alice, Countess Devereux, knelt and listened to the voice of Father Bright. "I shall not give you any penance, my child, for you have committed no sin. That is, insofar as the death of your brother is concerned. For the rest of your sins, you must read and memorize the 3rd chapter of The Soul and the World by St. James Huntingdon." He started to pronounce the absolution, but the Countess said, "I don't understand one thing. That picture, that wasn't me. I never saw such a gorgeously beautiful girl in my life, and I'm so plain. I don't understand." "Had you looked more closely, my child, you would have seen that the face did look like yours, only it was idealized. When a subjective reality is made objective, distortions invariably show up. That is why such things cannot be accepted as evidence of objective reality in court." He paused. "To put it another way, my child, beauty is in the eye of the beholder." If you like this story, there's a ton of Lord Darcy stories. They're not all public domain on Gutenberg. Look for Randall Garrett, from my recollection, they are all at least as good as this one. Some of them, the one that sticks in my head is one that was clearly a riff on The Murder on the Orient Express, but with its own set of twists. I really loved these books a long time ago. Now I got to go into storage and figure out where my copies are.